Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm your host, Justin Steele, and tonight we are going to discuss Single White Female and the Roommate, two films centered on obsession. Directed by Barbet Schroeder, Single White Female stars Bridget Fonda, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and Steven Weber. After finding her boyfriend has cheated, software designer Allie decides to get a roommate named Hetty. Life seems swell until Allie's boyfriend comes back into the picture and Hetty starts to duplicate Allie's look and style. Directed by Christiansen, The Roommate follows new college student Sarah and her roommate Rebecca. Sarah is instantly popular, while Rebecca only cares for her relationship with Sarah and will do anything to keep Sarah all to herself. Both films center on the idea of obsession and when obsession crosses the line. Sharing similar themes, Single White Female and The Roommate each have something to offer to fans of thrillers. Also joining me tonight is my amazing co-host, Zena Dixon. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us tonight. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm doing good, Justin.
Good. I'm so excited to see you. We had a nice little break, but I have been looking forward to talking with you about this one and the other one for quite a while now. Single White Female and the Roommate. It's February. It's after Valentine's Day now, but Valentine's makes us think, I think of like hearts, romance, love, and a little bit of obsession.
Mhm.
And obsession is definitely at the center of the two films that we're going to be discussing tonight, which are Single White Female and The Roommate. I love Single White Female. I've loved it since I saw it. I was probably about 9 or 10 when I first saw it. I think my dad rented it. My parents had gone to sleep, and I think I wasn't allowed to watch it. But then I went and put the VHS in the thing and watched it and saw things I probably shouldn't have. But I thought it was just a fantastic movie. Jennifer Jason Leigh's performance is out of this world. I think she's definitely one of the most underrated actresses. I
Yes.
loved her also in Dolores Claiborne. Again, another movie where she gets the whole movie was underrated and definitely unrewarded. But I also love Bridget Fonda, who does not really act anymore, which makes me sad because I also loved her in every single thing I've pretty much ever seen her in as well.
Mhm.
And I think that the energy they both bring to the film is fantastic. I
Yeah.
think that where The Roommate, the other movie we're going to talk about, focuses at very similar themes and a lot of similar plot points are kind of hit. But I think that The Roommate is more of and as always, everybody, no spoilers, no spoilers at first. We'll let you know when the spoilers are happening. But our no spoiler review, I think The Roommate focuses a little bit more on the sociopathic perspective, whereas Single White Female is more of a borderline personality perspective. And that's
Mhm.
a bit of the tragedy of Jennifer Jason Leigh's character. The haunting images of like her being a twin, which obviously affects the rest of her life. Now, I've also read the book, and the book definitely takes a different approach with her character, but I really like that it becomes this film about the strangers that we let in our lives. And I think that's
Mhm.
a really scary thing. In The Roommate, it is more of you're kind of forced when you go to college to, you don't know who you're going to get, which is just as scary. And when you are going
Right.
off to college, that's a nervous feeling. This is more Single White Female about the choice. You're choosing to like invite this person in your life, but it just goes to show like there's no real questions you can ask anybody to know if they're going to be a little crazy, be a little, we all can put on that great first impression, but sometimes it takes a little bit to really get to know somebody. And I think it could be a
Mhm.
really scary thing. But I think Single White Female is a very suspenseful movie. I think it is from the beginning, very much of its time. It's got that early 90s feel, but it was also at the time very fresh. The idea of it's post feminism, well, post feminism versus the pre feminism we're now in again, where women really did have, for the first time, still not equal to the rights that men have, but the first time really could be out there with the career, be there with, they had all these choices for the first time. And in this film, it's these two very different women who are independent, but one very much becomes reliant on the other, and the other one is struggling to just figure out, does she want to be
Mhm.
married? Does she want the career? Can she have it all? And unfortunately, there's like these forces all coming at her in a very realistic way. But the idea of using like ads, the singles column, the want ads to really bring in like, so technology at the time, even though we can look at it now, the early 90s, I think it's still a fresh concept because it was fresh at the time.
Right.
But anyway, the performances in it, I think single white female are fantastic. It's a nice tight cast in a environment that's this huge city. I love the
Mhm.
look of the building she lives in. Everything about it is creepy, the right kind of creepy though.
Mhm.
The roommate, on the other hand, I also think is fresh, even though yes, it does recycle quite a few ideas from single white female. I do think that there's enough differences that make it its own kind of movie. It did get really critically panned at the time, but I think that Leighton Meester, who I was a big fan of Gossip
Mhm.
Girl, so I really liked seeing her. I wasn't surprised to see her in this role. I guess she was originally cast as the Sarah character, but she was born to play this sort of Rebecca role. I think she does a fantastic job. My only real criticisms, one will have to wait to the spoiler about the character of Irene, but the other thing is that I do wish they had, where single white female, the fact that Hetty was really trying to become like Allie, the look and everything was became a big part of it. I wish that there had been a little bit more done in the roommate, where because the girls did look a lot alike and they did
Mhm.
use that did play. I wish that had played a little bit more into it. I feel like you have these two actresses that do look enough alike. There could have been a little bit more play with that. That being said,
Right.
though, I think that it all comes together in the end. I think that there's a lot of really good moments, which, just like single white female, it's these performances that really, I think, engage the viewer and make it worth the watch in the end. But that's my
Mhm.
general non-spoiler review. Zena, what are your thoughts on single white female and the roommate?
Ah, I thought you would never ask. I love these movies. So first with Single White Female, like you, I watched it entirely way too young. For some reason, my parents let me watch a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have, but I'm fine. It's fine. So yeah, I love the feel of this movie. It feels very 90s. And I love kind of like that throwback type of feeling because when I watched it as a kid, a lot of stuff flew over my head. And because of this movie, we even have like a saying sometimes, I don't know if you ever hear people say like, oh, be careful, she might single white female you.
Oh
And
yeah.
usually you know what that means. And just like, it's a thing, okay? If you have a friend who is copying off your clothes, your hairstyle, and you might want to get out of there. But yeah, I really enjoy this movie. I'm someone who loves thrillers and I love like 90s movies, which we always talk about. I love the actresses' performances. Like Hetty at first, she does seem sweet. She seems sweet, and I can understand why Allie would pick her because she was going through a really rough breakup, and at the time she needed a friend and someone who, like, you could vibe with the person, so why not like invite them in? But then obviously, little by little, Hetty just starts to become annoying and a little bit too much. And I think that if she just would have like chilled, it would have been fine. And apparently there is a have you seen the sequel?
I have like bits and pieces, not enough to like
Okay.
really comment on it, but
Yeah, it didn't have the magic, as this one. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but for me, it just didn't have the magic. But really love this movie. I love that we'll get more into it. I'll explain one of my favorite all-time scenes that lives in my head rent-free forever and ever. But yeah, Bridget Fonda, she's amazing. Jennifer, Jason Leigh, like all of the actors. And did you know the building, the like apartment building, it's a real building.
oh yeah.
Another, yeah, West Side. And I just thought that was really cool. So the other thing, going on to the roommate, when I first checked out the roommate, I watched it in theaters because I love both of the actresses. So I had to see them like on screen. Minka Kelly, I always been a fan of her. Lisa Meester, they're great, right? So when I first watched it, I knew, I was like, okay, are they trying to like remake Single White Female? This could be cool, but I don't know. I checked it out. I didn't like it back then when I first watched it, right? And then a couple of years after, because it came out, 2011, right? So then a couple of years after, I want to say maybe 2013, 14, I decided to like revisit it. And it's just like, it was the best thing ever. So obviously it's important to like rewatch movies. We talked about this all the time. But yeah, basically this girl named Sarah, she's a college freshman. She just freshly broke up with her boyfriend because they had problems. We'll get into that. And then, you know, she's on her own for the first time. She's waiting for her roommate. Rebecca to me seemed cool at first, kind of like Hetty, because you know she lived in LA, she grew up there, she can easily go home, and she had like a great wardrobe. So it's just like, how are you going to be that crazy? But apparently that's the thing, you know. But yeah, she just becomes so obsessed with her, where it's just like, I would have took that as a sign from Sarah when she added her on her, it was like this social platform, and she was listed as Sarah was listed as her best friend, as Rebecca's best friend. And it's just like, and then also, no spoilers, I'll just wait until now. But point is, it's a great movie. I love the cast. Yeah, we'll get into it. I love this movie. If you love thrillers, you know, edge of your seat type of stuff, this is a good time. So there you go with that.
Well, I'll say too, and from here on out, everybody, spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. But I'll say, I think what helped for me the first time I watched it, and you sort of touched on this, was I don't know if when I watched the trailers, maybe because I thought they were so similar, I sort of assumed that they were doing a remake of it. I realized like right after that, I'm like, oh, okay, this is just its own thing. It's not really supposed to be a remake. But I think going into it thinking it was going to be a remake, I didn't really think of it as like copying it or anything. So for me, I kind of was like, oh, I like that it's so similar to
Right.
Single White Female. So that helped me. Again, Single White Female to me is the better movie. I love that movie. But similar to what you were saying, I rewatched The Roommate for this episode, and I also enjoyed it even more the second time around. I
Yeah.
felt Leighton Meester, just what she brought to it was for me enough. And we've talked about this before from horror fans. Everybody loves something a little different. Some people are the gore fans. They want to see blood, blood, blood. Other people want the final chase scene, et cetera, et cetera. For me, I'm all about each of those pieces, but it could be enough for me that if there's just one good performance, that makes the whole movie worth it for me. And I think Leighton Meester does that job. Minka Kelly, I think, is great too. For me personally, I still don't really know a lot about her career,
Mhm.
but because I already had that Blair Waldorf attachment,
Yeah.
I thought that Lee was great. Billy Zane, I'm also always happy to see in
Yes.
anything, and I really like that with the inclusion of his character because he also has the counterpart in Single White Female to Mitch. I like that for anybody that like is going into The Roommate kind of looking down on it a little bit. I think that it does bring up some really relevant issues, and that is the whole Billy Zane character of the teacher pressuring this younger girl to do things for grade or for whatever
Mhm.
pressure for her career, you know, is something that happens thousands of times a week. Like it is all the
Right.
time. So I think that that's really relatable, and I'm glad that it's a topic that's discussed. Now, I probably would have discussed this later, but I'll forget it. But, you know, talking about the whole Mitch sequence and everything, I love just with that too. It shows how things that were happening in the early 90s still was happening 10 years ago, still happening now. And I love in both situations the idea of a friend, despite how maniacal they may end up being, the devotion. And that is a part of obsession. You know, you'll do anything for this person. And Hetty calls and threatens Mitch and tries and takes him out, as well as what Rebecca does to
Mhm.
Billy Zane's character. And I like that, you know, it's that twisted satisfaction of knowing that somebody's getting their comeuppance. And I think though both counterparts in that film, it's played out very well and the right way in terms of the revenge aspect, but like deliciously so. So what do
Mhm.
you think about that, the whole revenge, that part of it?
Okay. I love both parts because, okay, first off, with Hetty, we didn't really see, we knew it was coming as the viewers, but, you know, she seems super sweet. We didn't really see that coming. You know what I mean? Or you would think that you wouldn't have seen it because of her personality, with her being so sweet. Just the way she sounded on the phone. And then, you know, even when Allie said, oh, God, you know, I hope that you never get mad at me like that. It's like,
Right.
yeah, like, who's that? You know? So there's that. And then with Rebecca, with what she did with the professor, obviously, you know, Sarah doesn't know that it was Rebecca, you know, and so it's just kind of like, I kind of like that she kept it a secret,
Oh
you know
yeah.
what I mean? But it's just like, in my opinion, it was just like everyone kind of around Sarah majority of people, they were seeing there was something off about her, you know. Tracy, the roommate who Sarah met when they went, you know, they went partying one night or whatever, and she got super drunk and left her. So, well, first she exposed herself, like, woo, you know, and then and then she kind of just left her high and dry without her phone. You took her wallet to be with a guy in a jacuzzi because he had a Porsche. Like, girl, bye, right? So, but yeah, I like the fact that, you know, Tracy saw, the boyfriend kind of was, or her new boo thing, he kind of saw, and then clearly the professor saw, but she kept it kind of in the dark. So in Sarah's case, minus when she starts to, you know, act crazy, you couldn't really see that coming with that. But because Allie saw that, you know, sometimes friends do get mad at each other. So, I mean, but what could she do? Kick her out? You know? So I kind of like I like the reveals, like, in each movie for different reasons. That's just the shorter way to put it.
I think too, well, I think it emphasizes the borderline personality version versus
Yes.
the sociopath. Now, upset, you know, again, with obsession, you know, I think, yeah, you want to know, I think from Rebecca's point of view, it's very much like, you know, the whole, we're supposed to do things that are good anonymously. So from her, it's like this other carrot of like, see what a good friend I am. But
Mm-hmm.
the sociopath, you know, ultimately doesn't really care, you know, like, oh, well, I'm hiding this, or I don't have to tell her. I know it's good enough for me. The borderline
Right.
personality, Hetty, is very much, and I am not a doctor by any means. I'm just, you know, what I know from these sort of terms,
Mm-hmm.
but it would want to present herself like, see what I did, ta-da, for you, because she wants that acceptance. She wants to have
Right.
that sort of thing. But I will say too, yeah, about the character of Tracy, you're right. Everyone does kind of see around Sarah, but at the same time, I could understand from Sarah's perspective, like Tracy is kind of a flaky friend.
Yeah.
You know, and I think the actress did a fine job and everything, but I definitely was sort of like, and that's the interesting part of these movies. I sort of was like, you know, I can understand why Hetty's a good friend or why Rebecca's a good friend. The whole idea of like, you know, I think we're supposed to with Allie. So Allie, you know, she's with this guy, he cheats on her, she needs this
Mm-hmm.
roommate. She tells Hetty right off, hey, we're not going to get back together. Hetty moves in, and then basically like a month later, this all turns and she's going to have to move out.
Yeah.
I'd be pretty pissed if I was Hetty
I
too.
would be too.
And
Yeah.
vice versa with Rebecca. I'd be annoyed too if this person who I feel like I'm developing a strong friendship with is sort of ditching me for the flaky friend who ditched her earlier on. You know, so it
Mm-hmm.
is sort of that subversion of like we can relate to these sort of quote unquote villain characters
Mm-hmm.
in ways that are different. You know, again, like I said, Jennifer Jason Leigh, I think, is super underrated. Talking about the leads of both, I think that one, Bridget Fonda too. I again, like I said earlier, I wish she still did stuff. I loved her in Point of No Return. Jackie Brown is my favorite Quentin Tarantino movie, and a part of it is because of Bridget Fonda's performance. Just so many different things. And Single White Female, you really can feel for this. You know, you can see where she's in between a rock and a hard place. With,
Yeah.
you know, she feels bad for Hetty, but at the same time, again, you constantly are able to relate to the point of view
Mm-hmm.
of each of them. Obviously one then starts to take it too far, and the same thing, I think, you know, Minka Kelly, you can relate to her vulnerability of losing this sister. And
Yeah.
I also know what it's like to, as much as it is to be the good friend, to have somebody that starts to like copy behaviors. You know, I had this one friend, it was like, it was silly things, but like I would tell certain kind of jokes, and then the next time we were out, they would kind of tell those my jokes, but like take the credit for it. And
Yeah.
again, not to be petty, but it was sort of like, wait a minute, that was, I told you that. That wasn't,
Yeah.
you're not the one who's funny here. And then another side funny story. Because you mentioned this when we were first talking about being single white female. We had I was sitting with a group of friends one day, and we started laughing so hard because there were these two girls we went to high school with that did everything together, same hairstyle, same outfits, same everything. And one day, one of them was absent, and we were like, oh, what is she going to do without the other half of single white female today? We just kind of making those jokes, and it's the terrible whatever. But it is nice to have those sort of references like that you can reach out from pop culture that I always loved. Yeah, I think Bridget Fonda, the arc that she has throughout the movie, because even though Hetty calls her weak, and there are times where she could be perceived as weak when she is sort of so
Yeah.
forgiving of
Hmm.
her boyfriend, her fiance, etc. But I love these little moments where you see her getting stronger and stronger throughout the movie. And I feel like Minka Kelly's character does that same sort of arc. And again, Jennifer Jason Leigh, underrated. The abilities that she has, the movements she makes, the her phrases, everything is fantastic. But what do you think about those the performances of each set of leads?
Okay, first with single white female, all like they really did an incredible job. But for me, like you already said, Jennifer Jason Leigh, she's incredible. Like how she's able just to again come off super sweet, but then it just turns. And like when she called Allie weak, and you could hear there was something in her voice, when she said that. It was in a way she did kind of come off weak, but at the same time, we've all, I don't want to say we've been there, but you know, with some relationships, there's some people that you're willing to forgive sometimes. So I don't really know if that made her weak, but I can see how it looked like that. And then as far
Sure.
as it goes, yeah, as far as it goes, even with Sarah for the roommate, with Rebecca, first off, both girls did a really great job, but Leighton, like she's incredible. Like you, I was like a big fan of Gossip Girl, love Blair Waldorf. I
Yeah,
wanted to be her. You see my headband?
for sure.
So yeah, but like seeing her in this role, I was so excited to see her in that role. But it's kind of like, okay, there's a couple of questions that's kind of it kind of cuts into it, but like I love her as this because it was like my first time seeing her more psycho. We've seen her as a mean girl, mean, powerful girl. But this I love how with both movies, because I don't know if this movie ever really came out and said that this is like the official remake or reboot type of thing. They never really said anything about it. I just assumed. And so even just taking a look at that, it's kind of like clearly both of the women, they have some type of like a something with their mental health, and
Yeah.
how they display it. Hetty, in my opinion, she obviously, like you said, with first impressions, you're able to make a great first impression. But then with Rebecca, it's kind of like, yeah, she made like a good person. She seemed nice. Like I thought that she was like nice. And obviously she's nice if she likes you, type of thing. But it just seemed like you can't step on her toes, meaning if you can't come between them. It's like with both characters, they didn't really want them to have anybody else or animal, and both, but sadly, what happened to Buddy and what happened to Cuddles. So it's just like, yeah, so looking at that. But because of Rebecca, my question, because with Hetty, she wasn't in contact with her parents and she was more of an adult, right? Seen as an adult. With Rebecca, because she's in college, her parents seemed very kind of afraid of her, when because we noticed that when they go back to visit for Thanksgiving, and then it's just kind of like they seem afraid of her. And then they're asking Sarah how she's doing, if she's taking her medication. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why doesn't she have, I don't want to say somebody watching her, but she doesn't do check-ins. Like it doesn't have to be like every day, weekly, bi-weekly. And I just thought that was just kind of weird. But is it really weird because Rebecca seemed very like, I'm fine, that she didn't want that, type of thing, how she behaved towards her parents. So I don't know. It's just she did such a great job with coming off as being, dangerous. She had like a little couple of spooky moments especially with at the gas station with the gas. Like that was just like, listen, that guy should have ran for his life. But yeah, I'm going down a rabbit hole of just keep talking with it. Both performances from both movies, awesome stuff.
Well, to just piggyback onto that, I think you're right. I think what I thought it was going to be more clear cut for us to both discuss. And I realized as I was talking too, I was struggling a little because I think what it really comes down to is that each lead from Bridget Fonda, Minka Kelly, Leighton Meester, and Jennifer Jason Leigh, each actress has that ability to have both sides. You really do it like because I feel like you were about to say, Leighton Meester, Leighton Meester I feel like really did have that ability to come off as almost aloof, but at the same time, when she needed to be needy and obsessed, she was. Same
Yeah.
with Jennifer Jason Leigh. Clearly, this is a girl that can take care of herself.
Hmm.
You know, an adult, a woman that can take care of
Right.
herself. But if she finds somebody to fixate on, she's completely vulnerable and needy. I mean, even, and we'll get into the endings at the end, but you know, willing to kind of put yourself out, like even if they're mad at this person, the vulnerability always wins. Same thing with Minka Kelly and Bridget Fonda. There are times where they're vulnerable, but when they have to kind of step up to the plate, they can. And that's really, I think, because of the actresses' performances.
Yeah.
Something that I do want to jump over to that you mentioned, and I don't want to forget to discuss it, is what I like about Single White Female, and one thing I do like about The Roommate, is with one, you sort of do get a little bit of the history of what makes Hetty the way she is. The Roommate, they don't really give you
Hmm.
specifics about what makes Rebecca the way she is. Now, I do, the fan in me wants to know what really, what happened between Rebecca and that girl before, who first said, I
Hmm.
was never your friend.
Oh,
Obviously it never escalated to where it went with Sarah, but clearly something happened that they saw her and they like backed out of the store, but we never really get those answers. Same things with the parents. You're right, they seem afraid of her, but there's no real reason given to it. Hetty, on the other hand, we do see the history. We get the twins images right off the bat. We see that Hetty lies about being a twin, or that it was stillborn, but no, this was a twin that was 9 years old that drowned. So interesting enough, and you see like this. Now, I will say the book, do you care if I spoil the book a little? Not too
please
bad.
do.
Okay. The book, it's less about her obsession with Bridget Fonda's character with Allie. It is more of an identity theft is the kind of the
Ah.
center of it, where she wants Allie's life, but not so much that she wants to make Allie also like a sister to her. She just wants, and she succeeds quite a bit.
Hmm.
Like she gets the fiance boyfriend. She kind of gets the Graham character upstairs, if I remember correctly. Like
Yeah.
she gets her
Uncle
identity,
Graham.
and it becomes a struggle to get that back. Whereas these movies, which I do think was the right choice, especially for Single White Female, it's not, I think there's like this always cliche that an adaptation is never as good as the book. I think the movie definitely made the right choice to add this extra layer of like love between the women,
Hmm.
where whether it does border on a little bit of like sexual desire, but also sisterly love, and again, not crossing over into like an incestual way, but all of these
Right.
dynamics, because I don't think relationships are ever just that simple between two
Hmm.
people. But anyway, what do you think about that? With like I like that the history is not all explained in The Roommate, but I do like that it is kind of, again, it's not all explained in Single White Female either, but it does give you a little bit of enough to piece it together. That being said, I am frustrated because I do want to know what happened with Rebecca.
Right. So I feel the same way. Like I like that we know a little bit about Hetty without it being like too crazy. There's still a little bit of a mystery, did she really drown type of thing? And with the parents, what happened with the parents, right? So, but we know enough to keep us enticed. With The Roommate, we don't really know anything. And I'm not gonna lie, like for the longest time, I'm so curious. I've always wished that they would have told us what happened. But I guess, obviously, looking at it, she probably did the same thing, like stalk that girl throughout her whole high school experience. It probably got so bad. And then even when she said, like, I mean, when I first saw it, like I said, it just went over my head. When I remember rewatching it years later, and I was just like, this is so good. When she says to the girl, when she tells Rebecca, Maria, her name's Maria, she's just like, you know, we were never friends. It's just kind of like, and Sarah was right there because Rebecca introduces Maria to Sarah, her now roommate, and all the friends are around and they look very uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And the fact that she even said hi, it's just kind of like, wow, why would she even do that? Right. So fast forward when she said that, and it was just kind of like, you know, I mean, I'm a nosy person, so I would have asked her, like, hey, what's that
Right.
about? you
For
know,
sure.
but I remember the look on Sarah's face, and it's just like, honestly, that was the look on my face because it's just like, that's, you meeting someone and they're like, we were never really friends, just like, oh, that's awkward. But yeah, I've always wanted to know more, but clearly she survived, and somehow, like, Rebecca left her alone.
Yeah. Well, it's
Why is
interesting too,
that,
because it's always like obsession. It shows too, just in that moment about what you were saying. even though something happened and she has this new obsession, it just shows how hard it is to let go of old obsessions because she is just, like, clearly something happened and things are bad and she's still like, oh, hi, Maria, like, I think that's interesting though about obsession, how hard it is to like let it go. It lingers. Obsession lingers for a while.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just, it was just oh hi. Like after you like stalked her. I'm sorry, that's not funny, but yeah.
I do want to talk a little bit about the suspense. So I think that there's a lot of great moments and rewatching, I rewatched them both, but I rewatched Single White Female again last night. And I just noticed as I was like trying to get some of the media ready for this, it really jumps in so quickly because you do relate to these characters. The fear of like having to get this client and then you're dealing with this slime ball.
Oh,
But
yeah.
also just as the movie unveils that you get to know these characters. What do you think is worse? Do you think it was worse the getting the tattoo of the girl's sister's name, or do you think the whole hairstyle? Now, worse, maybe, yeah, obviously it's worse to get somebody's sister's name, but like, what
Yeah.
do you think you would have been affected more? Somebody getting a tattoo that you have, or all of a sudden the new hairstyle and everything, and it's going around saying, hi, my name is now Zena?
Honestly, it would be the hairstyle and them
I think
saying
so
that
too. I think
my
so
name
too.
because it's like, yeah, the tattoo's a little bit that's wild. You know what I mean? And it's just kind of like clearly there's something going on. But if someone wants to, not only do you want to be my friend, but because remember she even found like she thought those were her pieces in her closet, but
Yeah,
the
yeah, she's
girl went
like
to the
pulling them together. Yes.
no, nope. And I can say this. I remember when I was in high school, I had a situation like that. It actually happened to me twice when I was in high school. We were friends, we were cool. And I can take you where I shop and that's fine. Next thing I know, you're wearing the same jeans that I'm wearing. How'd you even know I was wearing it today? So there
Imitation
was
is
that.
not always the sincerest compliment.
Right. It's not. It's not. I even had a girl one time. This was like a couple of years ago. Like, do you remember the whole ombre thing that was going
Yes,
on?
yes.
Yeah, you had like an ombre with some honey brown at the bottom, and it was great. It was a vibe. And the next thing I know, she did too. And it's just, but after asking me so many questions about who do I go to type of thing, and it's just like I didn't think you were gonna go get the same thing. Where at one point from afar, somebody thought that she was me, you know? And so it's just like, yeah, that's a no for
That's
me. So that's
unsettling.
why I feel like that is far worse. Like that's not admiration. That's like something else.
I think
But
so
what
too. I mean, it's like, and here's the thing: there's so many moments in each movie that's shocking. But yeah, I think when you see her walking down the stairs of that salon, and you're like,
oh my
you
gosh.
literally, you're saying it as Allie is saying it. You've got to be kidding
Yes.
me. It's messed up. Which do you think is worse? The what happened with Allie's fiance, or what happened with Sarah's boyfriend? What do you think was the more shocking of the two?
Allie's fiance
I
had
think
me
so.
screaming. Like, because first off, there's even the buildup leading to that where it was just like by the time he found out that it wasn't Allie, he was just in a paralyzed
Yes.
situation and it was shocking. And then leading up to it, she just grabbed the hill and like stabbed him in the eyeball. It was brutal and unexpected.
Yeah.
So for sure.
Yeah, I think it was too. It's an interesting concept of like the reverse sort of sexual harassment. Like she's sitting there, like putting down Allie's boss for harassing, but that is sort of a like taking advantage of the guy. He thinks it's his girlfriend, but I know
Yeah.
in after that scene happens too, my heart always gets, no matter how many times I watch this movie, when the hotel guy sees her and he thinks it's Allie. So I'm like, how is she going to get out of this? No matter what,
Mm-hmm.
now she's screwed. Like they're gonna think Hetty is Allie, like and it's the same thing again. It's just as effective in the roommate,
Right.
and that's the one scene where they really utilize the two girls looking alike. Like I said before, if I have a criticism of the roommate, it is I wish they had used that a little more. You have these two actresses that look like each other, do a little more with that. But
Yeah.
with Single White Female, I also think that attack is a little bit more shocking. Like you're like, whoa. And then before we get to the end, though, I will say I've always loved these 90s thrillers. I think that it's interesting. It started with or the late 80s, early 90s section, where it is sort of the tale of these women that are potential killers. It starts with, Fatal Attraction, then Basic Instinct, through Hand That Rocks the Cradle. And I feel like that period of time really does end with Mother's Boys, which we both love as a movie. Single
Yes.
White Female, though, I think is one of the most interesting because it really does put these two women against each other, but not in a catty way, not in a like, oh, like these women, they became friends. And I feel
Right.
like it's more hurtful that, that it could dissolve like this because you understand, like we said, each one's point of view. But it's creepy when you see, yes, Hetty looking like Allie going to this club saying that she's Allie, and then the whole club with the cage boy that's like petting Allie's face, and she's like lost. Like I love I think it's true to life how she goes to Graham, but it all culminates obviously in these two confrontations. And I will say, in The Roommate, my one issue that I wish they had, I never care about if we have a lot of survivors, but I really think it was unreal. Like the thing with Irene, I thought was great. I love that they kind of inverted it, that Leighton Meester's character, was willing to like play with her, like flirt with her, go for it. And in order to to kidnap her, but I also think it's a little unrealistic. What was Irene doing for? It was like 4 or 5 days after that they finally found her, but she was still alive. Like, because clearly Sarah moved out. Rebecca's just sitting around. I feel like Irene was just like tied up for like 5 days. I don't understand. So I think it would have been cooler if maybe they had killed her. Like if, I don't see why she had to survive. I think it would have been more believable if she had, gone in and found Irene dead. And then like the attack happens, the boyfriend comes in, he can be the hostage. But yeah, as far like that's my really only criticism about the ending of The Roommate was just I was surprised that Irene was still alive after kind of being there for at least like 4 or 5 days. Like, was she just kind of going in to check on her, letting her go pee, tying her back up? Like, I feel like that is it. But that being said, I do really like the way The Roommate plays out. You know me, I talked about this before during our The Good Son episode. I'm a giant weirdo and I love any scene where it's like the overhead POV shot of somebody like hanging out a window or having to climb back on. And because I think it's one of the most thrilling things. I think it's like, what do you do? I know me, I don't think I could pull myself back up. It gets terrifying for me, the thought. So I love that it becomes that sort of Leighton Meester finally loses control and gets angry with Sarah, really lets it out and like tells her how she feels. But I like that even up to the end, she still wants that friendship. And I love that. And I think that coming back to the whole Maria thing, I like that little line is added, like, I was never your friend, like to just emphasize, like, listen, Rebecca, I think you're about to die, but just in case you survive, two people have now told you I'm not your friend.
Ooh.
Like you need to
Yeah, that was
learn
an
to
ouch.
calm
Yeah.
down. Yes. But I think it's all well played. Single white female too, from the moment the whole scene happens with Steven Weber's character. I love that it is that sort of suspense of, like I said, my heart was beating, like how, even if she survives, can she get out of this? Like, is she
Right.
going to have to face a murder charge? And I love that kind of thrill, but compounded on top of that, it's all very well crafted, and you get to see Bridget Fonda's cleverness and strength using the TV to turn the remote up to get
Yeah.
the noise complaint.
That's
And
smart.
this is what I was kind of alluding to at the beginning when I was talking about, like, even though it's dated now, I like the use of like trying to use the internet, the very, very prehistoric version of the internet to like call for help, which is how she also put the ad out to begin with. I think that's very cool. And at the time, it was so innovative. But ultimately, it comes down to technology is not going to save anybody. It is going to be basic instinct fight. And I love that it does come between these two women. And as the fight continues on and on, even though Hetty has these homicidal now tendencies, it really does become she still wants, Allie to just love her. She wants to be a sister to her. And there's a few times where you think, okay, this is it. She's going to kill. Like when she's testing her out the suitcase, like if she's going to carry, and you're like
Yeah,
thinking,
that was
oh, is this going to be her body? No, she just plans on carrying her literally. And I like that it still takes place in the building, but you have that whole elevator down, the sort of cat and mouse chase. You think this one is it. And I always love a good like mirror, sort of
Mhm.
a symbolism where Hetty injures the mirror thinking it's her, but it is her. And ultimately, it's left with this ambiguous ending of you see that Allie is talking about surviving and trying to forgive herself, but it does sort of leave you on this note of like, well, who put that picture together, the sort of amalgamation picture at the end? Was that Hetty that she did, or is maybe, Bridget Fonda? Like, because she's really alone now. I guess she still has
Yeah,
Graham, which I think he'll bring her back to sanity. But otherwise,
yeah.
the guy she loved, dead. Her career is going to be in trouble now. But ultimately, I think that both of these movies give you that sort of release that we
Mhm.
look for in watching horror movies and watching thrillers. And me, I kind of like to, I feel like there's like the big ones, like there's comedy, drama, and horror. And I feel like thrillers, psychological thrillers, they're all under the horror category in my book. And
Mhm.
I think that it still gives you that feeling. It is sort of like a slasher, single white female in a lot of ways. But what are your thoughts on how it all wraps up for the roommate and for single white female?
So with the roommate, this is gonna sound weird. I'll start with this one first. I kind of felt bad for Rebecca. I
Yeah.
feel bad for her because it was just kind of like, yeah, she was a little unstable, unhinged, a lot of things. But the look on her face when Sarah says, we were never friends," like again, and so I was kind of hoping that she would survive, but whatever. But yeah, but I like the ending because I like the fact that with Sarah, it's just kind of like she moves the bed out of her room. She doesn't want any more roommates, and I don't blame her
Yeah.
with that. I agree with you with Irene, where it's just kind of like, yeah, she was just she was just tied up for like days.
Yeah.
And I mean, I doubt that she let her go to the bath. She probably just went to the bathroom on herself, type of thing. So, which is even more horrifying. And when it comes to the roommate, it's just like a very effective thriller. And kind of like you, I always felt like when it comes to thriller movies, it's under that horror umbrella because it is more of a psychological type of thing. It just doesn't have blood, gore, or even nudity for the roommate, but it's
There's a
still,
lot of nudity in single white
yeah,
female.
yeah. And I was gonna say like, well, I'll get to that, but with this, it's just kind of like it's not really scary, but it's more disturbing. You know
Yes.
what I mean? And so
Yes.
it's just like that's like a different type of level because to me it felt disturbing, feels more realistic sometimes. And then as far as it goes with the single white female or single white female, that movie, that ending, I love seeing Allie's strength, where it's just like at this point, we clearly see her strength. And the fact that Hetty calls her weak, clearly someone weak would not have been able to do all that,
Yep.
Again, you could see how Hetty's able to like lure people in because even when she stops at it was like a check cashing place and the girl behind the counter is intrigued by her. And it's just like, she's charming. So it's just like I can see how people are lured in by her with that. I love the ending of single white female because finally, again, Allie found her strength. And yeah, at the end of it, where it's just like she lost the love of her life and then she lost Hetty, but she does still have Graham. And it will take her some time, but I think that she'll be all right. I can see that. The same thing even with Sarah. I just think that she probably won't really trust anyone again. With both women, they won't trust anyone again. But yeah, both of the ones are great endings, but I really didn't feel bad for Hetty, but I did feel bad for Rebecca. I know that sounds
Interesting.
strange.
Interesting. No, I felt bad for Rebecca too, but I definitely felt more bad for Hetty. But I do think you're right. I think that Sarah, where Allie is going to be vulnerable for a while. I think she's found this inner strength that's going to get her through. I feel like Sarah's going to be a little more brittle now, like a
Yeah.
little bit more like not dealing with anybody's nonsense. Disturbing. Sometimes that's scarier to me. And I feel like horror at its core, is to scare. and
Right.
these suspenseful 90s thrillers, again, because obsession can be a very scary thing.
Which movie do you prefer and
Between the
why?
two, a single white female.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I very much enjoy The Roommate, and
Mhm.
I like the updatedness. I really
Mhm.
like I said, I liked how they brought in certain contemporary themes, like with Billy Zane's character, and how you would. But I also like that this would appeal to, I think demographics for most horror people are those that are in their that rough college age right there, so they're going to relate to it. Whereas single white female and all those 80s 90s thrillers were more for an adult, are
Right.
more about adult fears and adult audiences. But for me personally, yes, I think single white female for me will always be the one I prefer. But what about you?
Okay. It depends on my mood.
Yeah.
I love both movies, but it's like I prefer single white female, but if I did have to pick between which roommate to have,
Oh,
I would pick
sure.
Rebecca. Yeah, like I'd rather because it's like think about it this way. It's kind of like, both of the women, it's like they just really, really wanted to be these women's friends, right?
Right,
All you
right.
have to do is just be their friend. Don't have anyone else in your life, type of thing. But you need to make sure that you're showing that person how important they are. And it's rough, but it's just like, listen, I don't want to end up in your suitcase or, you know what I mean? Or end up in your notebook type of thing. So I was just thinking about that. But I will say, like, if I did have to like recommend one to someone, it kind of depends because kind of like we already talked about, I feel like single white female is way brutal. There's blood, there's nudity, like it's insane. Whereas with the roommate, it's more like a PG-13 thriller.
Sure.
So maybe
Mhm.
it's like the kids' version of
Sure.
single white female.
The
So if
junior
you're
edition.
someone, yeah, if you can't handle too much,
Yeah.
then yeah, you can watch the roommate. You'll be all right.
I agree 100%. I think that different audiences would have different expectations of them. And I really think at the end of the day, they both do a really great job with very
Mm-hmm.
similar themes that at the core is of the idea of obsession and how it can lead people to do crazy things. And in each of their own ways, even Allie, Sarah, they all have their own obsessions. But
Mm-hmm.
obsession, there's good obsessions. And there's also bad obsessions when it starts to, lead to murder, etc. But I think both films really do, at the end of the day, examine obsession in a way that I think all audiences really could enjoy. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What are your favorite early 80s, 90s thrillers? Have you seen Single White Female and The Roommate? And which one is your favorite? Which roommate would you want to have? Thank you, as always, Zena Dixon, for joining us tonight. You can find Zena over at realqueenofhorror.com, over on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker, or over at Wicked Horror. I'm Justin. You can also find me at Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter at Wicked Horror Justin. Thanks, Zena, for discussing Single White Female, The Roommate. I've been waiting to get to talk to you about these for a while, and I had a blast. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely, and we'll see y'all soon. Have a good one.